Hello, welcome back to Form Check Friday. I'm here with your host, Bryce Krawchuk.
Yep, we're here.
If you're wondering how to submit, just check the description. We have a link that takes you to our website. That's where you submit all your lifts and all that stuff. Let's get right into it.
All right, let's form check it up.
First up, we have Landon.
All right, Landon.
This is a 250-pound bench. Can't figure out leg drive or hand placement.
So with this foot placement, I think leg drive's tough. I much prefer to have my feet like out here and or maybe a little wider and have a full foot in contact with the bench, right? Because
With the bench?
sorry, with the ground. Yeah. Dylan's right. Because what I think the easiest way to describe leg drive is going to be to be applying pressure back this way in order to drive your chest up. And because your upper back is frictioned or is going to create friction against the bench, if you push your body this way, this friction is going to help keep your shoulder blades down, right? So shoulder blades are going down, legs are coming back, chest is going up. That's generally kind of the gist of leg drive. I like that you bring your plushy thing to the bench there. I think that's probably good luck. Now, with the hand placement, we're super narrow here. It's a good, very close grip bench. It looks like we're also kind of maybe stuck between two styles of touch here, right? So as you descend, we do this nice light touch, but then it sinks and then we press. I'm gonna say that if you're gonna do a light touch, do a light touch, and if you're gonna do a sink, do a sink. But this combination of both is maybe a bit off-putting for you to try to do both styles of bench at once. I think that generally speaking, a grip wider than this is going to be stronger. Now, it doesn't have to be all the way out max legal first fingers on the rings, but I think even going to the point where your ring finger or middle finger on the rings, that's a pretty standard average bench grip for most people. Now, when you get out there, one of the things that you might struggle with is where you're touching. One of the reasons this might feel good in this close is because it's very natural to touch at this point, this lower point. And if you're missing or not able to sort of recreate that shoulder blade depression with the wider grip or to get the chest up, then it can feel like you have to touch really high. So, try to recreate and use this same touch point with a slightly wider grip, I think is gonna help. The other thing, obviously this is a limit lift, like that's an at 10. So, if the bench isn't progressing the way you want it, might be a case of, I don't know, maybe you're maxing out too often, maybe you're not, and this was a planned thing and it was 12 weeks leading into it and whatever. But, I have to assume, because I was and still am a big meathead inside. And it's really tempting to kind of load the bar up and see where you're at. However, I think a lot of times that can be pretty disruptive to progress. So bench programming is another thing I would look at, right? Trying to make sure that you have something that's gonna allow you to put enough weight on the bar to train hard and get stronger, but also not shoot you to the moon every session to the point where you're creating fatigue you can't recover from. So you can always check out the Calgary Barbell app for some great training. That's definitely a thing at calgarybarbell.com. There's a bunch of great programs. We do technique reviews like this every week for our lifters in the private Discord. Anyways, so yeah, those would be kind of my main things there. It's tough to tell a bit whether or not this sort of loss of shoulder position is something that happens all the time, or if it's just because it's like 100%. But yeah. Hopefully that helps, man.
If you're a meathead on the inside, what are you on the outside?
I don't know. You tell me. Let me know in the comments below what I am on the outside. I'm not reading the comments for this video.
Moving on. This is Ava Deadlift. 140 kilos for one. This is a PR. Recently switched to sumo. Thinks it looks somewhat inefficient and the lockouts are feeling especially slow when loads get heavier.
Okay. So we talked last week about the hips down for a lot of people being synonymous with hips forward. And I think that's part of what's happening here, right? Like this is a really squatty kind of position, right? The knees are super far forward. And before this bar comes off the floor, there's a lot of change that happens, right? Knees go back, hips go up, knees go back, hips go up, knees go back, hips go up. About here, this is the shin angle where we start to pull the bar off the floor. So in your setup, this is probably about the shin angle you're gonna wanna try to find. Now, if you're doing this in your setup, you're probably gonna be able to find a slightly better back position, and you'll be able to get a little more set through the trunk and hips. Now, the other thing is we're looking out and maybe a little bit up. So I think we're like biasing a lot of upper back and thoracic cervical kind of extension, which means we're maybe missing out on some extension we could be getting here if you were looking down here, if your head was a little more in line with your trunk. So pack the neck in, keep the head in line with the trunk, and work on trying to find this shin angle, pulling the hips down and back so that we can create a bit more brace here. It looks like the shoulders are really far forward as well. You could probably pull the shoulders not back, but down more to try to, effectively shorten the torso. Now, as we go through the lift, the reason the lockout gets a little sticky is because we lost that little bit of back position off the floor, right? A lot of the times when we end up losing that little bit of back position, we're a little bit rounded out. We get to lockout and it gets a little tough. Belt looks a bit tight, might be easier to feel out positioning either without the belt or with a bit of a looser belt. Not necessarily saying that you should do all of your work with a looser or no belt, but in order to work on that start position, it might be good to kind of remove the belt from the equation, remove that extra sort of stimulus and feedback so that you can, more easily get into a good position. However, all told, that's a clean lift, right? We do see a lot change off the floor. It is a little sticky at lockout, but I love the fact that you hit the lockout, you hold it, you keep your hands on the bar all the way down. That is, this is 3 white lights and a meet. So that's a great place to be starting from, right? We're not making any type 1 errors that would mean, we're getting red lights or a lift overturned or anything like that. So a little bit of technique tweak, and I think you can create a lot more power off the floor, a lot better positioning throughout the lift.
Our next submission comes from Artem. This is a squat. Artem.
Hard T.
A 142.5 kilo squat, I think, and this is a max. He says, struggles with getting pitched forward, so I keep my knees in the front, so I think he means like he keeps his knees more forward. Gets pain in the arms when squatting, used to be really bad, but happens more infrequently now.
Hold on. So, Artem, this is a max?
Yeah.
Couple things. Number one, I think we might be overanalyzing because we do like a pretty fantastic little hinge. I think we end up in a really solid position. I can see where maybe we're getting some issues with the arms, elbows, shoulders in terms of holding the bar position, but like you hinge super well. Bar's staying like right over mid-foot. We pop it back up. We don't really get pitched forward at all. And that looks like about a 7 RPE. So not saying, oh, go back to the gym and retest that max. But what I'm saying is that I don't think you're getting pitched forward as much as you think you are. My biggest recommendation here is gonna be with how you're holding the bar, where it is positioned on your back, and how you're positioning your shoulders and hands. So number one, based on how you squat with that really nice lean, I'm gonna guess that you're gonna be a little more comfortable if you can get that bar slightly further down your back, slightly further down onto your shoulders. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is really make sure that you're kind of pulling the shoulder blades back and pulling them down, right? We wanna open up and make some space for our hands to be able to be on the bar without being torqued back. If our shoulders are really far forward, like our hands are gonna move with our shoulders. And that's gonna make it way more demanding on the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist to have our hands on that bar, which is behind us. So naturally, we're gonna wanna pull those shoulders back, kind of open the chest up, lengthen the shoulder blades, if you will, and potentially widen that grip to make it easier to do so. Another big thing that a lot of people maybe don't consider when they're just getting started is thumb under the bar versus thumb over the bar. People are gonna be comfortable with either of those positions. Either of those are perfectly legal in competition as long as your hand is fully on the bar. So those are another sort of option to explore when it comes to how to hold that bar. But I think the mechanics of your squat here are really, really good. If we can get that bar slightly down your back, maybe a couple of millimeters, and we can work on having a bit tighter upper back sort of shelf position for the bar to rest on, your squat is great, Artem. So let's work on that stuff, and I hope that helps.
That brings us to our final submission.
Drum roll.
This is Miguel.
Miguel.
365 for 3 deadlift.
I love Miguel's style. The sleeveless flannel is a vibe. For real though.
Deadlifts feel inconsistent. Recently made the changes of standing closer to the bar, sitting lower, and being more aware of pulling the slack, and want to see if you see anything else.
I think your deadlift looks pretty great. I think one of the reasons it might feel inconsistent is because you're having to pull on hex plates. My man, hex plates are rough. Now, there might not be anything you can do about that. This might be the gym that you have access to. And, you know, kudos to you is mostly what I'm saying. But because of the hex structure, that bar is going to be rolling around every time you set it down, right? I'm seeing you're having to adjust your stance every rep. And having to adjust your stance every rep sucks, right? Because that bar is going to be moving out and moving back, and you're going to have to go around and kind of meet the bar. So, yeah, some of these reps, you know, we're pulling in. I think your first rep is probably the best. This is a great position. I think you might benefit from a slightly wider stance, like very, very slightly wider, because I think that'll allow you to just kind of get your quads a little out of the way so you can get into a really solid position. But that first rep is gold, man. It's just, yeah, unfortunately you have to adjust quite a bit from rep to rep. The second one looks like we're maybe a little behind the bar when we start, right? You sit down a little more, you're pulling yourself back, we're maybe a little more on the toes on second rep. So I think the biggest thing is gonna be just working on the consistency of your start position every rep, right? I think reps 2 and 3, we maybe pulled the hips a little low. Yeah, so here we go. This is rep 1, right? We've got, we'll say the middle of your butt is like there, belts there, and yeah, shoulder sort of seam is there. Now rep 2, you sit down really far and try to create that same tension, right? So we're here. I think one of the things that you do really well on rep 1 is you kind of pack yourself back behind the bar, and you get into this really solid position where shoulder blades slightly above the bar, you got knees forward but not too far forward, you look really balanced on the feet, and your hip height is great. The second rep, I think what we do is we sit down too far, we end up on the toes a little bit, we end up trying to be too upright in the back position, and then we get a little thrown out of position on that rep. And same thing on rep 3, you know, we're trying to be a little too upright, and there's this little bit of like, okay, you pick the bar, but then it's got to roll a little bit to get closer to you because we're maybe like too far back or too far on the toes kind of thing. Overall, your pull looks really good. You know, in order for me to analyze this, I have to be kind of nitpicky. And I think that first rep should be kind of the model that you use for how to recreate that position. So it's working on consistency. I think from rep 2 onwards, we're just sitting a little low. And I also think that our spacing to the bar is slightly different from rep to rep, which is a hard thing to account for with hex plates because the bar is going to roll away from you. But if you look at both rep 2 and 3, as you pull, right, that bar rolls towards you. Rep 3, you start the pull, bar has to roll towards you. Rep 1, you start the bar and it just goes straight up. So that could be a good marker for you to look at. That could be a good marker to look at for, you know, whether or not we're getting a good rep, is whether or not that bar has to move towards you before it starts. So I think that cue you mentioned of trying to be closer to the bar is a really good thing. Let's keep on that.
Honestly, he's probably better off just like resetting for each rep.
Yeah, like letting go of the bar, standing up, maybe taking a breath, doing a full reset, because he's not using straps, right? I think he's using a hook or something. So yeah, I would agree.
He'll like shift his feet a little bit, but he doesn't get in as good of a position after the first rep. So it's just like maybe stand up, center yourself
because
with
that
the
bar is like,
yeah,
it's rolling away from you each rep.
Yeah.
And then I don't think moving quite enough to keep up with how much the bar is moving.
Yeah.
And that's our show. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. I've been your host, Dylan, and we'll see you in next Form Check Friday next week.
Bye.